Rebuilding begins when you stop running from your own reflection, because the greatest transformation in your life won't come from changing your environment, your relationships, or your circumstances. It will come from changing your internal dialogue. There comes a moment when you have to stand still long enough to confront the truth about who you've been, who you are, and who you are meant to become. For years, many people stay trapped not because they lack potential, but because they avoid looking at the one person they cannot escape, themselves. You can hide from people, you can hide behind excuses, you can hide behind business, but you cannot outrun the mirror that follows you into every season of your life. And until you face that mirror without fear, without pride, without denial, you will keep rebuilding the outside while remaining broken on the inside. Rebuilding yourself in 2025 demands a level of honesty that can feel uncomfortable. Most people want elevation, but they don't want confrontation. They want change, but they don't want truth. They want growth, but they don't want accountability. You cannot heal from what you refuse to acknowledge. And many times we avoid our reflection because it forces us to deal with painful realities, the mistakes we made, the opportunities we missed, the habits that sabotaged us, the people we allowed to treat us poorly, the dreams we abandoned, the fears we nurtured. But hear this, your reflection is not your enemy. It is your invitation. It is the doorway to your rebirth. The moment you stop running from who you've been is the moment you make room for who you're becoming. When you look at your reflection, you're not just seeing your past, you're seeing raw material. You're seeing potential God has not finished molding yet. You're seeing a story still being written. But some people avoid the mirror because they think the reflection is final. They believe the scars define them. The failures limit them, the losses label them. Rebuilding requires that you understand one powerful truth. What you see right now is temporary. Your struggles are temporary. Your weaknesses are temporary. Your uncertainty is temporary. Everything you dislike about your current reflection is not a permanent identity. It's a starting point. You can't fix what you refuse to see. You can't strengthen what you pretend doesn't hurt. You can't rebuild what you pretend isn't broken. When you stop running from your reflection, you reclaim your authority. When you run from yourself, life becomes something that happens to you. But when you face yourself, life becomes something you shape, something you build, something you speak into existence. The reflection becomes a reminder that you are still responsible for the masterpiece you are becoming. You may not like everything you see, but everything you see can be changed, rebuilt, renewed, reformed. God never asked you to be perfect. He asked you to be willing to confront, willing to grow, willing to break cycles, willing to rise again. Running from your reflection often means running from the truth that you've settled, tolerated, delayed, or avoided things that you knew needed to change. Maybe you've been hiding from the decisions you should have made long ago. Maybe you've been hiding from the boundaries you should have set, the healing you should have begun, the conversations you should have had, the dreams you should have fought for. But embracing your reflection means acknowledging that even though you can't change your past, you can absolutely redesign your future. And the power to rebuild doesn't come from pretending you have it all together. It comes from admitting you don't and deciding to rise anyway. Your reflection shows you not just your flaws, but your resilience. Look closer and you'll see a person who survived storms they never thought they'd make it through. Look closer and you'll see someone who kept waking up even when life felt heavy. Look closer and you'll see someone who has more strength than they've ever given themselves credit for. You have lived through things that would have broken someone else completely, yet you're still here, still fighting, still seeking growth. That in itself is proof that you are worthy of rebuilding, worthy of renewal, worthy of restoration. Rebuilding yourself means taking responsibility for the shape of your own soul. It means deciding that you will no longer allow who you were to dictate who you can become. It means looking at your reflection with compassion instead of shame. Shame destroys, compassion rebuilds. Shame tells you you're unworthy. Compassion tells you you're unfinished. Shame freezes you in your old patterns. Compassion gives you permission to start again. When you stop running from your reflection, you stop punishing yourself for being human. You stop defining yourself by your failures. You stop carrying burdens that no longer belong to you. Some of the most powerful breakthroughs come when you admit, I don't like who I became in certain seasons. That honesty doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. When you face your reflection with truth, you stop blaming others for the part you played. You stop repeating cycles that you convinced yourself were fake. You stop attracting what you should avoid. And you start building with clarity, intention, maturity. You build not from insecurity, but from identity, not from fear, but from wisdom, not from desperation, but from purpose. Rebuilding also requires you to let go of the version of yourself that survived but didn't thrive. Some version is of you were necessary for a time. They kept you safe. They got you through trauma. They protected you in seasons of chaos, but they cannot walk with you into 2025. You can honor the old you without dragging them into your next chapter. When you look in the mirror and see parts of yourself that feel outdated, unhealed, or unaligned, that's not a signal to run. It's a signal to shed, to release, to evolve. You don't grow by avoiding your reflection. You grow by transforming it. 2025 is not asking you to be a different person. It's asking you to be your true person, the one beneath the fear, the one beneath the doubt, the one beneath the trauma, the one beneath the expectations of others. The reflection you fear is actually the key to the life you desire. And when you finally confront it, you no longer rebuild from pain. You rebuild from power. You rebuild from understanding. You rebuild from wisdom earned through storms. You rebuild from identity instead of insecurity. You rebuild from clarity instead of confusion. Stop running from your reflection, because your reflection is not just what you have been. It is what you have survived. And rebuilding yourself in 2025 begins the moment you say, I will no longer flee from the truth of who I am. I will face myself. I will fix what is broken. I will grow where I am weak. I will rise where I once fell. Your future self is waiting for you to stop avoiding the mirror and start using it as a tool for transformation. When you face your reflection boldly, you unlock the power to rebuild every part of your life with intention, strength, and divine alignment. That is where the rebuilding truly begins. Your breaking point was really God's blueprint for your becoming, because every moment you thought was meant to destroy you was actually designed to develop you. There are seasons in life where the weight becomes so heavy that you feel something inside you crack, your hope, your belief, your energy, your resilience. You reach a point where you can't pretend anymore, can't push anymore, can't smile through the storm anymore. And it's in that exact moment when you feel like you've reached the end of yourself that something divine begins to unfold. Breaking points are not the end of your story. They are the turning pages where God begins to write something new, something deeper, something stronger in you. When you look back at the moments that broke you, you may see pain, disappointment, confusion, perhaps even betrayal. You may see a chapter you wish you could erase. But if you look closer with spiritual eyes, instead of emotional ones, you'll begin to see the fingerprints of God all over that season. Sometimes God allows certain things to break because they were never meant to be the foundation of your future. He lets the weak structures collapse so the strong structure He designed can be built. He lets the wrong relationships dissolve so the right ones can enter. He allows the unstable identity you built on others' approval to crumble so you can find your identity in Him alone. What you called breaking, God called building. Many people misunderstand the breaking point. They think it's punishment. They think it's abandonment. They think it's failure. But in truth, your breaking point was the moment God said, I'm taking over now. When you ran out of strength, you stepped into His strength. When you ran out of options, you stepped into His strategy. When you ran out of clarity, you stepped into His wisdom. The breaking point is where human effort stops and divine intervention begins. It's where you stop fighting battles that were never yours to fight. It's where you stop forcing doors that were never meant to open. It's where you stop trying to carry a weight that God never intended for you to hold alone. Some of the best things God builds in our lives begin at the moment everything else falls apart. Because as long as you're holding on to what you think should be, God can't give you what's meant to be. When you hit a breaking point emotionally, spiritually, mentally, financially, you become open to change in ways you weren't before. You become willing to surrender. You become honest about what's not working. You become aware of the people, habits, and environments that were draining you. You start seeing what matters and what never did. Breaking points strip away illusions. And once illusions fall away, truth steps forward. God uses the breaking point not to damage you, but to align you. There were things in your life you wouldn't have walked away from unless something broke. You wouldn't have changed directions unless something collapsed. You wouldn't have discovered your strength unless something challenged you. You wouldn't have found God on a deeper level unless life pushed you to your knees. Some blessings can only be built after the breaking because breaking humbles you, sharpens you, matures you, and opens your spirit to receive God has been trying to give all along. There are people who look at their breaking point with regret, but I want you to see it with revelation. That moment didn't ruin you, it revealed you. It showed you what was fragile, but also what was unshakable. It showed you who was temporary, but also who was true. It showed you what mattered, but also what didn't. Breaking points pull the masks off everything around you and everything inside you. They force you into authenticity. They force you to rebuild your life, not on fantasy, but on foundation. And the powerful truth is this: every breaking point exposes the blueprint God wrote for your becoming. Architects don't build without plans. Builders don't create without structure. And God does not elevate you without process. Breaking was part of the plan. The tears were part of the plan. The confusion was part of the plan. The setbacks were part of the plan. The waiting was part of the plan, because each piece of your pain carved out a deeper capacity in you, a deeper wisdom, a deeper strength, a deeper purpose. God does not waste pain. He repurposes it. Think about how diamonds are made. Pressure, heat, intensity. Think about how gold is purified, fire, refining, removal of impurity. Think about how seeds grow, burial, darkness, isolation. When you understand this, you stop seeing your breaking point as your burial and start seeing it as your planting. What you thought was the end was actually the beginning. What you thought was destruction was really preparation. What you thought was loss was really alignment. God had to break what was blocking your growth, though, so He could build what would fulfill your destiny. But to see the blueprint, You have to shift your perspective. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Start asking, what is this making me become? Pain is the birthplace of becoming. Struggle is the sculptor of identity. Loss is the classroom of wisdom. Every breaking point forces you to evolve, to rise, to strengthen parts of yourself that were once weak. The blueprint God created for you has always been bigger than your comfort zone, which means it will often involve discomfort. Elevation always costs something. Growth always shakes something. Becoming always breaks something. Your breaking point may have revealed the end of one chapter, but it also activated the beginning of another. When life broke you, it broke open the parts of you that needed healing. It broke off the pride that kept you self-reliant. It broke down the walls that kept you from meaningful connection. It broke patterns that were delaying your purpose. What looked like devastation was really divine reformation. You were not breaking down, you were breaking open. And now in 2025, you are standing in the year of rebuilding with a blueprint only God could design. You are wiser now. You are stronger now. You are more discerning now. You no longer move blindly. You no longer ignore red flags. You no longer settle. You no longer shrink. You no longer apologize for being who you were created to be. The breaking point taught you to value yourself, honor yourself, protect your peace, recognize your worth. It taught you that survival is not enough. You were created to thrive. You may have thought you were alone in your breaking, but God was nearer to you in that moment than in any moment of your comfort. Breakings invite the presence of God. Break-ins soften your heart to hear Him. Break-ins position you to trust Him. When you were falling apart, He was holding the pieces. When you were crying in private, He was rewriting your future. When you were unsure of tomorrow, He was preparing your breakthrough. God is the architect who specializes in taking broken materials and building breathtaking masterpieces. So don't despise your breaking point. Don't resent it. Don't fear it. Embrace the revelation that it was necessary. It was purposeful. It was strategic. The version of you that is emerging now could only be birthed through that level of pressure. You are not the same person you were before the breaking, and that is the beauty of it. You've grown in ways others can't see. You've healed in ways you never announce. You've risen in ways you never expected. Your breaking point was God's blueprint for your becoming, the becoming of a stronger identity, a greater destiny, a deeper faith, and a more powerful future. You didn't break because you were weak. You broke because you outgrew the version of yourself that could no longer contain what God was forming inside you. And now you are stepping into a season where everything that once broke you will become the very thing that builds you. You are not just rebuilt, you are reborn. And not a single piece of your pain will be wasted. Reconstruction requires release because you cannot build a new future while clinging to the remnants of an old life. Too many people try to become better versions of themselves while still holding on to the habits, memories, relationships, and identities that kept them broken. You cannot rebuild with pieces that no longer fit. You cannot rise while carrying what was meant to be left behind. Every new chapter demands a letting go, a clearing out, a sacred release. And until you understand the spiritual law of release, you will continue dragging the past into places it doesn't belong, wondering why your life feels heavy, unbalanced, and stuck. Rebuilding yourself in 2025 isn't just about adding new things. It's about releasing old things, old anger, old shame, old patterns, old friendships, old fears, old versions of yourself that no longer serve the destiny God is molding inside you. Release is uncomfortable because it forces you to separate from what once felt familiar. Familiar doesn't always mean good. Familiar often means safe, predictable, even toxic. We get attached to pain when we've lived in it long enough. We cling to brokenness when it becomes our identity. But the moment you realize that holding on is costing you more than letting go, that is the moment you start to rebuild with purpose. Some people are trying to rebuild on top of emotional debris. They want new joy, but won't release old bitterness. They want new love, but won't release past heartbreak. They want new opportunities, but won't release old comfort zones. They want new growth, but won't release old excuses. Life cannot expand for you if your hands are full of what should have been released long ago. Release is not loss. Release is preparation. It creates the space where rebuilding can begin. There is a deep spiritual truth here. God will not force you to release what you insist on keeping. He will not drag out of your hands what you refuse to surrender. He will not push out of your life what you cling to in fear. Release is an act of trust. It says, God, I don't know what comes next, but I trust that what you have for me is better than what I'm afraid to let go of. Your future cannot come in while your past is sitting in its seat. Your blessing cannot arrive while your burden is blocking the doorway. Release is the key that unlocks what's meant for you. Reconstruction requires you to stop fighting for what God has already removed. Some people keep trying to resurrect relationships that have expired. They keep trying to return to seasons that have ended. They keep trying to rebuild versions of themselves that no longer exist. There are connections that were only meant for a chapter, not the entire book. There are jobs, opportunities, and friendships that served who you were, not who you are becoming. When God closes a door, it's not rejection, it's redirection. He is preserving your destiny by removing what could destroy it. You cannot rebuild with old pieces because old pieces carry old problems, they carry old wounds, they carry old patterns. And if you bring them into your new season, they will recreate old cycles. Release breaks the cycle. Release says, I am not repeating what I survived. Release says, my future is too important to be sabotaged by my past. Release says, I will not let yesterday steal tomorrow. When you choose release, you choose freedom. You choose forward movement. You choose evolution. But release requires facing the emotional discomfort that comes with it. Letting go is not always peaceful. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it feels like grieving. Sometimes it feels like you're losing a part of yourself. But understand this, you're not losing yourself, you're shedding the weight that kept you from discovering your true self. Growth often looks like grief before it looks like glory. When you release, you tear down the walls that kept you trapped. And with every wall that falls, your soul breathes again. Many people avoid release because they fear emptiness. They fear the unknown. They fear what will fill the space once something is gone. But what they don't realize is that emptiness is sacred. Emptiness is the birthplace of possibility. Emptiness is where God plants new seeds. Emptiness is where reinvention begins. You cannot be filled if you refuse to be emptied. Reconstruction requires that you release with faith, not fear. Sometimes releasing means forgiving someone who never apologized, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. Sometimes it means distancing yourself from people who love the version of you that stays small. Sometimes it means walking away from environments that are misaligned with your growth. Sometimes it means abandoning dreams that were built from insecurity instead of purpose. Release is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's internal. But every time it is powerful. There is also a release that must happen within yourself. letting go of the person you thought you should be, the timelines you forced on your life, the pressure you placed on yourself to have everything figured out by a certain age. Letting go of guilt, letting go of self-blame, letting go of unrealistic expectations, letting go of perfectionism. You cannot rebuild while you're still punishing yourself for your past. You cannot rise while carrying the weight of old shame. You cannot grow while chained to old decisions. Reconstruction requires self-forgiveness. Forgiveness is release. Release is healing. Healing is reconstruction. Reconstruction is rebirth. When you release old pieces, you make room for the right ones. You begin to rebuild with clarity instead of chaos, with intention instead of impulse, with wisdom instead of wounds. You start choosing people who choose you. You start choosing habits that elevate you. You start choosing environments that nourish you. Release refines your discernment. It sharpens your vision. It strengthens your spirit. Some people will not understand why you're releasing certain things. They will misunderstand your boundaries as attitude. They will mislabel your healing as distancing. But understand this, the people who are meant to stay in your life will grow with your growth. The ones who leave were never meant to be part of your reconstruction. Release is not rejection of others, it is protection of yourself. And understand this, release is not a one-time event. It is a practice. You will evolve again and again, and with every evolution, you will need to release again. There will always be new layers to shed, new mindsets to outgrow, new habits to discard. Reconstruction is a continual process. It requires consistent release because you are continually becoming. As you rebuild yourself in 2025, I want you to see your life like a house under renovation. When a builder reconstructs a house, they don't reuse damaged beams or cracked foundations. They reinforce structure. They strengthen support. They remove anything weak, unstable, or out of alignment. That's what God is doing with you. He is removing what can't support your destiny. He is replacing what can't carry your calling. He is rebuilding you with integrity, strength, and purpose. Release is not losing something, it's choosing something better. Release is not weakness, it's wisdom. Release is not abandonment, it's alignment. Release is not giving up, it's growing up. Reconstruction requires release because the life you want cannot be built with the pieces that broke you. But the moment you choose to let go, something shifts. The weight lifts, the path clears, the future opens. You begin to feel your soul turning toward what's meant for you. You begin to feel your spirit rising again. You begin to feel strength returning where weakness once lived. When you release, you free your hands. When you release, you free your heart. When you release, you free your destiny. And once you are free, rebuilding becomes not just possible, but powerful, because now you are building from a place of clarity, peace, and purpose. Now, you are building the life God intended, not the one pain pressured you into. Now, you are constructing a future without dragging the rubble of your past into every room. Reconstruction requires release, and once you release, you rise.